The second season of Tales of the TMNT explored each turtle, not by separating them, but by isolating them emotionally, pushing them into one of their core personality traits and exploring it as both a weakness and a strength. Now imagine you're the funny turtle. What happens when you stop being the fun one? Would your brothers still want you around? This story explores how the most empathetic turtle could make a difference in an eat-or-be-eaten world, even when it means having blind faith in the most horrible and toxic people around you. Join me today as I explore the tale of the Big Muck. The framing device of this tale was at the improv class, where Mikey was feeling tired of always being asked by Bailey and Madison to come up with stories about mutants. Nevertheless, they managed to convince him to tell one. It all started one day when the turtles were grocery shopping and got ambushed by a group of mediocre mercenaries looking to kidnap them for their blood. And it wasn't even the first time that week. Rod Underwood Jr. was still obsessed with becoming a mutant and had been trying to get their blood for a while now, even though he remained friends with Mikey. So far, Mikey has been actively ignoring all the red flags, thinking that it was just a phase and they were still good friends. His brothers, however, were already tired of him and started pressuring Mikey to break his friendship with him. This was something Mikey was very conflicted about. From his point of view, abandoning someone who needed a friend wasn't something he liked to take seriously. After giving the situation serious thought, Mikey realized that Rod was annoying everyone around him, so he decided to break up with him. But to Rod, Mikey was his best friend, and he wanted to make it work. Mikey then made him promise to stop trying to kidnap them for their blood, to which he agreed. Rob suddenly stopped sending messages to Mikey, which only made him feel even guiltier. His brothers couldn't see a problem with it. He still had plenty of relationships and activities to keep himself busy. This was when Mikey got fed up with their attitude. He wasn't just a one-note joke-telling, skateboard-riding, pizza-eating dude. All of them had friends that not everyone approved of, like Raph with the Purple Dragons and Donnie with Irma. Their not liking Rod felt a lot like they didn't want him to grow as a person. This seemed like an interesting conversation to be had, but the turtles were interrupted by the arrival of a limo sent by Rod Underwood Sr., who wanted to talk with them. Knowing that Rod Sr. had funded Bishop's research, Leo was suspicious of the whole thing, but the snacks in the limo were enough to tempt them into taking a ride to the Underwood Tower. In that meeting, Rod Sr. showed them a ransom note and a box with Rod Jr.'s beard. Sr. was not willing to spend any money on his waste of a son, so he asked his friends instead, because they would rescue him for free. The other turtles felt like Rod Jr. getting kidnapped was karma and decided to stay out of it. But Mikey couldn't abandon Rod like this, and he asked Bailey and Madison for help, especially considering that his first suspect was Bishop. Bishop was now working for the EPF and building a giant mechazoid. Despite the colossal red flag in front of him, he assumed that, given how the night of the mechazoids ended, Bishop was their ally. But after some dust made him sneeze, the mechazoids mistook him for a mutant threat and attacked him. It was only after Bishop's boss told her not to harm the mutant that she ordered the mechazoids to stand down. Mikey was angry. He thought they were friends. Bishop then told him that he clearly had poor judgment when it came to making friends. She spelled it out for him that she had all the funding that she needed, so she didn't have any reason to spend more time with Rod. However, she did tell him about Rod's siblings. He had a brother named Todd and a sister named Maud, and they both hated him. Mikey returned home to find his brothers watching Rod's last live stream, where he was kidnapped on camera. But that wasn't the most important thing. They checked a few minutes before, when he revealed that he had finally got his hands on some mutant blood and was planning to become a mutant. Perhaps even a mutagen man. Leo was concerned. He felt that they needed to get that blood back before it fell into the wrong hands. But they now had two suspects to investigate. Todd was a fitness guru / life coach, and Maude was the CEO of something called the Null Group. Mikey pretended to be interested in science and interning for the Null Group, and he requested a meeting with Maude. They spoke with Dr. Morong, who took them to Dr. Underwood.
Whoa! Rod's sister is a doctor? That's amazing. What kind?
She has a PhD in her father being rich.
It became apparent pretty quick that Maude didn't know much about her company or science, but she made a pretty great coffee. Of course, she allowed the meeting to take place because her scientists were interested in mutant blood. The scientists then sprayed knockout gas into the room, and the turtles had to fight without breathing until they could leave. They then asked Maude about her brother's kidnapping, but she couldn't see why anyone would want to do that. If anyone should be kidnapped, it should be her, as she was her father's favorite. Then she accidentally knocked herself out. Next step was Todd, who conveniently threw tranquilizer darts at them, captured them, and took them to some sort of cult resort where everyone wore animal masks and pretended to be mutants. To their surprise, they found Leatherhead already there, enjoying the adoration from her fans. Todd introduced himself and said he really wanted to meet them. This whole place was based on his father's teachings about this world being eat or be eaten. He denied kidnapping Rod because Rod was food. The only alpha thing he ever did was hang out with the turtles. Everyone in this club admired mutants, so they were having a big feast that night in their honor. While jumping on a trampoline, Mikey and Raph realized that they were using cooking oil and seasoning on Leatherhead, something she thought was to hydrate her skin. It became clear then that they were planning to eat them under their theory that this would transform them into mutants. This would prove to Todd's father that he was good enough. In a way, this also confirmed that he didn't kidnap Rod, because he wasn't aware that he had a bottle of mutant blood. While the turtles and Leatherhead escaped, Todd managed to get one of her scales and took it to the Null Group, where Maude gave it to Morong to create some mutagen. Meanwhile, Rod found a way to escape on his own, and once free, he called Mikey and told him that during his captivity, he had recognized a voice, his father's. For the turtles, this didn't make any sense, but to Rod, this was a trend. His dad was always taking things from him. To him, things like friends and family were merely distractions, and while Rod just wanted to be a family, his father created a toxic environment where his kids would compete for his love, and he would then take their accomplishments for himself. But the joke was on him, because the mutant blood he had was fake. It was just a mix of soda with kitchen muck. After hearing there was no actual mutant blood, everyone was out. But Mikey couldn't leave him behind. Rod Jr. just went through a traumatic event, and he should stay by his side. Back at the Null Group, Morong successfully synthesized some mutagen. This was an impressive breakthrough because they could now cure diseases, develop new medicines, and get really, really rich. Before they could test it, Maude knocked her brother out and decided to give it to her dad to prove her worth to him. Knowing that Rod Sr. had a bottle of fake mutagen, Mikey and Rod went to the Underwood Tower to confront his dad. Rod actually just wanted to get the fake blood back. This was the closest attention he ever paid to him, and he didn't want to disappoint him by telling him the truth. They questioned Rod Sr. about the kidnapping, but he said he didn't do it. His son was worthless, so why would he send a ransom to himself for nothing? However, he did track down the kidnappers to buy the valuable mutagen. He explained that he was very disappointed in Rod Jr. He gave him his name, but he never achieved any potential. In his eyes, being the fun one wasn't good enough. The only good thing he ever did was to get his hands on some mutant blood. He wasn't willing to let Junior become a mutant, not when he could become a more powerful mutant. When Rod Sr. was about to drink the sludge, Maude stormed in with her vial of mutagen. She gave it to him, and Rod Sr. simply drank both at the same time. Having drunk it all, he suggested that his assistant focus group his new mutant name, Power Rod. Given the mix of what Sr. drank, Mikey clarified that he was less of a power Rod and more of a muck man. Rod Sr. became very violent toward Mikey and Rod, and it didn't take long for them to realize that things weren't going as expected. By now, everyone wanted something out of this situation. The Turtles saw the live stream and decided to go to the tower. Todd decided to take his followers to storm the tower and retrieve the mutagen. Dr. Morong gathered a group of null workers to recover the mutagen back and use it for science, and to get rich. Bishop sent her mechazoids to get the mutagen back before it could create something worse. Rod Sr. went full blob, right about the time that everyone swooped in to get the ooze back. A little too late. Rod Jr. could have escaped, but stopped, because he needed to go back for Todd and Maud, who were still in the room. When he returned, he saw his father eating his siblings, and then started chasing them. This situation got Donnie thinking. He always theorized that humans would explode if they came into contact with the mutagen, but after seeing the creation of Pigeon Pete, Mikey suspected that mixing the mutagen with something else could do the trick. Rod Jr. felt like he needed to come back and help his dad somehow, something the other Turtles weren't interested in doing. But Mikey, who had been trying to help Rod all along, despite everyone's opinion of him, related to his dilemma and stood by his friend. He wanted to be to Rod what the other Turtles were to him. Just like Rod, Mikey did dumb things, but his brothers always had his back. No matter how big an idiot he was, they were there for him, and this inspired him to be better. They made him a better person, and Rod deserved to have someone like that in his life. Having convinced his brothers, the Turtles started figuring out how to solve this situation. Mikey realized that whatever substance was in Rod Jr.'s sludge probably made the mutagen go bad. Perhaps manufacturing more of it was the solution to further diluting the mutagen. After a quick visit to the kitchen, they attacked Muckman with the new sludge, but their approach wasn't big enough to stop him. That was when Rod Jr. took a leap of faith and jumped inside his father with a full bottle of special muck. After opening it, Muckman exploded, though enough of him remained to save it in a jar. Todd, Maud, and Rod also survived. His siblings were surprised by Rod's Zeus vs. Kronos moment and having been saved by him. Finally having the family moment he always wanted, Rod hugged them. No longer needing to impress her father, Maud decided to leave science and start a coffee company. Todd quit the gym and started a foundation to protect endangered species. Rod took over his dad's company, and Bishop was almost finished with her giant mechazoid. The only loose end was the identity of the kidnappers, who were very obviously Bailey and Madison by the way that Mikey told the story. This was something Mikey improvised because of how much they were annoying him for mutant stories. This story was written by Mikey Levitt, Ellie Guzman, and Matthew Bass, and it delivered some of the plots around Rod that were set up in the first season. And speaking of seasons, a few months ago it was leaked through a Playmates interim results briefing that Paramount had extended the series to 4 seasons. This would have kept the Turtles on the screen until the release of the 2027 sequel. Unfortunately, it was recently announced that this season was the last one. However, Paramount was open to licensing the show to another network or streaming service. At the time of this writing, it's unclear what will happen with Tales. I think this was a great show that needed more stories to gain momentum, and I really hope we get to have a 3rd season somehow. There was a moment in this story when Mikey clarified that Rod Jr.'s genetic mutation was heterochromia and not anisocoria. This was in response to something that Rod Jr. said in the first season about having eyes of different colors. It's unclear whether this was a writer's mistake or the characters, but it has been corrected. This may have been the most relatable story of the season, mainly because it explored a side of Michelangelo that's always there, but he's not always recognized for. In fact, it's sometimes used as his weakness. His empathy sometimes makes him ignore red flags, even when it's dangerous, but not ignoring them would make him a more cynical person. And as this story makes clear, Mikey is a very loyal turtle. Rod Jr. was the same with his family, and it's interesting to see how, in this story, Mikey got his dark reflection in Rod Sr. and an actual reflection in Jr. The story also implies that treating others as you would like to be treated is a solution to the eat or be eaten mentality. And it's a bit funny that the characters with this mentality were actively trying to eat others in these episodes. Of course, all of it could also be a reference to the myth of Kronos, the power-hungry titan, eating his children and getting defeated by his own son. But you get my point. Finally, there's a strong possibility that the whole story was improvised on the spot by Mikey for an exercise. I don't think this is the case, except for the idea of Bailey and Madison kidnapping Rod, which would mean that the identity of his kidnappers was a loose end. I'm not sure what the original intention was, but as a reader of the original Tales comics, the framing device wasn't meant to be taken seriously, not like the actual tale. Those frontispieces were there to introduce the story with a nice pinup, often made by a guest artist. So until proven otherwise, I'm going to take the framing device as an artistic liberty and the tale as canon. What about you? Did you enjoy this season? Do you want more seasons? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. See you in the sewers.